Paul Krugman, writing today at the Times, where he states categorically and with good reason that Republican cruelty is a pre-existing condition. Yeah. You see, Republicans just won't stop trying to take away health care. I used to wonder why. Why, over the past 9 years, well, more than that, it goes all the way back to 1993, shortly after the Clintons, the Clintons became co-presidents of the United States. And Hillary worked with a couple of people. The one I remember the most because of his name, Ira Magaziner, that was his name, worked with a couple of people and came up with a health care idea, health insurance, national health insurance, that apparently was just so garbled and so impossible to understand that it was defeated before it ever made it to kindergarten. And the reason I know about that is because when the health plan was to be released, I was one of 2 or 3 radio hosts who were invited to go to Washington and interview some of the people who had put it together, including Hillary Clinton and Al Gore's spouse. What was her name? Tipper Gore. And so we went, my producer and I, and they had a studio in the old executive office building, which sits on the White House grounds right next to the White House. And that's where we broadcast from. And that was back in the day when we did a 3-hour show. So we got into some of the details, all of which I forget now. All I remember is the way the Republicans just fucking came unglued in 1993, 1994, because Hillary Clinton had put together a health care plan, which is one of the reasons that they've hated Hillary ever since. See, the Republicans, they don't like Social Security. They've been trying to destroy that for 80 years. They don't like Medicare. They've been trying to destroy that for 50 years. And now the Affordable Care Act, they don't want that either. And I used to think, well, it's because Republicans are, for the most part, capitalists, and they think that health care shouldn't be a right. It should be a privilege. If you don't have money to buy health insurance or to get health care, then fuck you, go die. Now, these are the same people who claim loudly and sloppily that they're Christians. They do. And this is not something that their Jesus told them to do. But you see, when you hear me bust up on Christianity, I don't like religion to begin with, but when you hear me bust up on Christianity, these fuckers who represent Christianity, I'm really busting up on them. They're such swine. Such swine. But for some reason, it's not all that obscure what the reason is. They want the Affordable Care Act to fail. They have tried, 55 times, 60 times to vote it out of existence in the legislative branch. Hasn't happened. They've tried to destroy it at the Supreme Court. Hasn't happened. They've tried over and over and over again to take away, and in the meantime, in all that time they've been trying to take it away, it's been slowly building to the point now where we have 50 or 60 million, 70, 80 million people who would be directly affected, no, actually more than that, if these Republican scum manage to destroy Obamacare. Now, I talked about this the other night, I think. It's one of the programs that we have coming up while we're gone next week. But the actual number is about 130 million people would be severely affected if the Affordable Care Act is destroyed by the Republicans. And, of course, the Republicans don't give a fuck. They're going to do it anyway, or they're going to try. Krugman writes, it's already clear how the 2020 election campaign will be waged. Republicans will claim falsely, because they are liars. They're Christians, so they are liars down to the fucking bottom of their feet. The Democrats, the Republicans will claim, want to take away your hamburgers. Democrats will assert truthfully that Republicans want to take away your health care. I guess we'll have to see which argument wins. You know what this hamburger bullshit's about? Because Democrats have pointed out, a couple of Democrats, some of the newer, more lefty Democrats have pointed out a very salient fact, that so much of the methane that is released in the atmosphere comes from bovine animals, cows, moo, because Americans are hung up on eating red meat. And as countries come out of their poverty-stricken financial straits, the ones that do, they want meat and they want beef, unless it's India. No beef. You don't eat beef in India. As a matter of fact, if the Hindus even think that you're butchering cows or selling cows to be butchered, they will fucking kill you in an instant, because cows are sacred. So that's where that comes from. Cows fart enormous and burp. It's mostly cow burps. I mean, they talk about cow farts. It's mostly cow burps because they have, what, 7, 8, 20, 80 stomachs or something. And, you know, they're eating grass, for Christ's sake. And they have to chew it up and swallow it and then burp it into another stomach and digest it some more, and then whoop, into another stomach, digest it some more. I mean, it's a pretty long process from eating grass and shit until you have milk. You still drink milk? You shouldn't. Oh, God, this is insane. Everything's insane. But that's how the cow fart thing started, and that's why the Republicans now are screaming and grabbing their balls and claiming that the Democrats want to take away your hamburger. Yep. This past Monday, the Trump administration, according to Krugman, adopted a new position on a lawsuit over the Affordable Care Act, telling a federal appeals court that the Trump administration now supports the complete elimination of the Affordable Care Act. Throw the whole fucking thing out. The Affordable Care Act has made health insurance available, of course, to many Americans who wouldn't have it otherwise. But Republicans don't care. They're Christians. They don't give a fuck if you live or die. They don't. Because to these fucked up Christians, the fun begins after they're dead. Yeah. And I'm not talking about zombie land. That's when they get to go to heaven. Krugman writes, we have a very good idea what would happen if this lawsuit were to succeed. Around 20 million Americans would lose health coverage. 20 million would lose it, but it would have an effect on about 100 million more. Trump thinks that attacking the Affordable Care Act is going to appease and please his Christian base. But the greatest devastation, and this is a part, you know, I almost wish it would happen. I won't wish that because a lot of people depend on it. But I almost wish it would happen because the devastation, if the Affordable Care Act is taken away, would actually, the worst devastation, would come in the states that supported Trump in 2016. Because they believed his promise that he would defend health care. Look, it doesn't even bear repeating anymore. Trump is the worst fucking liar ever to be created. In West Virginia, for example, 160,000 people, which is over 10% of non-elderly adults, because the elderly adults have Medicare. 110,000 people, 160,000, 11% of the non-elderly population would see their health insurance taken away, gone. Now, Trump and the pigs around him who support him, like Lindsey Graham Cracker and that turtle-looking motherfucker from Kentucky. Oh, God. Mitch McConnell? They swear that that wouldn't happen. You're going to lose your health insurance. We're going to take away from you, but don't worry about it, because the Republicans say they're going to unveil a great health care plan to replace Obamacare. It'll be wonderful. It'll be made out of gold and diamonds. It'll sparkle in the sunlight, and you'll love it. You'll have so much winning, you'll get tired of winning. You've heard that before, yeah. But of course, Republicans have been saying that for 9 years, ever since Obamacare went into effect. What have they come up with so far? Not a fucking thing. Nothing. Nothing. Do you think the 160,000 people in West Virginia who would all of a sudden be stripped of health care, do you think that they're aware of this? Probably not. Republicans don't have a plan, and they never will have one, because it is against the grain of Christian Republicans to show compassion, to show understanding, to show morality, to live a decent life, to be a non-hypocrite. Republicans can't do that any more than a fish can ride a bicycle. It can't be done. So why do they keep talking about it? That they have this great health care plan just waiting in the wings when they get rid of Obamacare. Because they know that their constituents are dumber than a pile of boiled owl shit. That's why. They know that their constituents, when Obamacare is snatched away, if that happens, it won't. If it is snatched away, the Republicans know that their constituents will then stand there and say, well, where's the replacement? And the Republicans say, well, it's coming. Don't worry, we don't have one yet, but it's coming. And they know that their constituents will then say, well, it's Hillary Clinton's fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the liberals. The liberals did this. It's the liberals' fault we don't have health insurance. Right? Of course. The day after this latest Trump attack on Obamacare, House Democrats released a plan to enhance the Affordable Care Act, mainly by expanding the subsidies that limit the share of income families have to spend on insurance premiums. In other words, Democrats want more government, that means tax money, going into health care subsidies for people who are just barely able to afford the health insurance that they have now through the Affordable Care Act. You know, when you stop and consider that the death and militaristic budget is approaching $1 trillion now, or when you stop and consider that Trump gave a $1.2 trillion tax cut to the wealthiest Americans, increasing the subsidies of the Affordable Care Act for people who need health insurance could be handled like that, except for one thing. The Christian Republicans, they don't give a fuck. Why should they? Why should they care? They don't have to care. Lower income families, if this idea from the Democrats got through, which it won't, low income families would end up paying less. Middle class families whose income is now just a bit too high to qualify for subsidies, yet still find the cost of insurance a little bit hard to bear, would be brought into the system and see major gains. Middle class families, all of a sudden the Affordable Care Act enhancement would say that they too would now be able to afford health insurance on a more equitable basis. No. The Christian Republicans will not allow that to happen. Krugman writes, we don't yet have estimates of how many Americans would gain coverage under this plan, but it would be a lot of people. The House plan would bring national benefit levels roughly up to levels in Massachusetts, which had a more generous Affordable Care Act sort of plan in effect since 2006. They had Obamacare before Obamacare was even invented. Massachusetts did. And a Republican governor, Mitt Romney, signed that into law. So, Massachusetts, which has had a more generous Obamacare-type plan in effect since 2006, and where the percentage of non-elderly adults without insurance is a third of the national average. Achieving Massachusetts-type results nationally would mean around 15 million more people gaining coverage, which is unrealistic given the political atmosphere, but an indication of how big a deal this could be. Republicans, the Christians, no. Not only do they not want that to happen, they want to rip the fucking hell out of the Affordable Care Act until there's nothing left, stomp it into the ground, set it on fire, and then Trump can produce his beautiful, wonderful health care plan that doesn't exist now, never has, and never will. Now, all of this would cost money, probably several $100 billion, say $300-400 billion over the next 10 years. And what should Democrats do if the Republicans then stand up and say, all right, you liberal fucks, how are you going to pay for it? Well, what the Democrats should do is immediately laugh in their faces. Because remember, the Republicans recently rammed through a tax cut that benefits the wealthy that will probably cost $2 trillion. That's 2,000 billion over the next 10 years with no offsetting savings. The Affordable Care Act saves the country money. But don't try to explain any of this to a Trumper. Enhanced health care, expanding the Affordable Care Act, could easily be paid for by rescinding just part of that big giveaway, that big tax giveaway. Republicans will not do that, so it's not the Democrats' problem. It's Republicans. But they'll blame it on Hillary. You know they will. Krugman goes on, and if this proposal's advocates, increased Affordable Care Act, are willing to be relaxed about the funding as they should be, the plan is basically ready to go. If Democrats take the Senate and the White House in the 2020 elections, they could easily enact this plan, easing the burden of millions of Americans almost immediately, until some Christian challenges it in front of the Supreme Court. Fuckers. So, okay. What about the progressives who hope for a more fundamental health care overhaul, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She got it exactly right, Krugman says. While still calling for hearings on Medicare for all, she declared herself, quote, happy to support any provision that strengthens the ACA and plugs some of the gaps that we're seeing, end quote. That's what Ocasio-Cortez said. Bernie Sanders has refused to support the plan at all. We can hope that he changes his mind about that, can't we? So, Democrats have a realistic plan, a workable plan, an honest plan, an easily understood plan to expand health care. Republicans, they're still pursuing their jihad against Obamacare. Krugman says the question's why. He says, we have, after all, gone well beyond the point where trying to kill the ACA was a smart, if cynical, political strategy. The act has become increasingly popular since Trump took office. Health care was central to the 2018 midterms, where 75% of voters who considered it, 75% of voters considered it the most important issue. They voted Democratic. So why can't the Republicans just cut its losses and accept that Obamacare has become part of our social fabric? After all, there was a time, you won't believe this, but there was a time when people like Ronald Reagan insisted that Medicare would destroy American freedom. That was before he was president. It's going to destroy American freedom, Medicare. And these days, as Krugman points out, Republicans pose as defenders of the program, even when they're still trying to undermine it and privatize it and take it away from people. But they're Christian Republicans. They can say any fucking thing they want to. Political scientists have some interesting thoughts about the reasons Republicans won't just throw in the towel on the ACA. But details aside, modern Republicans just hate the idea of using public policy to help Americans get the health care they need, even when people's inability to get insurance is a result of pre-existing medical conditions over which they have no control. If that seems remarkably cruel, that's because it is. And there's no sign that this attitude on the part of the Christian Republicans will ever change. Why should it? They can't change. A zebra can't change his stripes. A leopard can't change her spots. And a Christian Republican cannot find compassion and understanding on morality and the truth and work to help their fellow Americans just fucking have health care. Can't be done. Krugman concludes by writing, in today's Republican Party, cruelty toward the most vulnerable is a pre-existing condition. It's insane. But it really isn't. I mean, I shouldn't say it's insane, because when I say it's insane, that takes it out of the realm of rational discussion. It's not insane what the Republicans are trying to do. It's cruel and mean and vicious, and it's because they are cruel and mean and vicious. And they practice a religion that somehow they have twisted into a belief system that itself is cruel and mean and vicious. Hey, Truth Seekers, Mike Malloy here on the Progressive Voices Network. We've got a deal for you. You can now subscribe to our new 1-hour audio-video combination Malloycast for only $29 a year. But you have to act fast. This deal ends on tax day, April 15th. Since we're without any business managers now, 100% of your support goes directly to maintaining our nightly campfire. Visit MikeMalloy.com to renew or to subscribe. And thank you for all the ways you keep it lit.